Good evening. God bless you and welcome to HUR at Home Inspiration. I'm Jackie Gales Webb, and every Sunday at 6 p.m., we talk to talented, gifted individuals about faith and how it plays a role in their lives and what they're doing in their lives to impact the lives of others. I have a fabulous guest for you this evening. I first want to welcome those of you who are viewing Charles Keener. God bless you, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us. And I invite you to do as Charles did. Please put your comments, your hellos, your hallelujahs, your thank yous in the chat. Thank you, Bernice Lane. God bless you. And please keep doing that. If you're joining us, I'll give you a few moments to put your names in the chat so that we can recognize you. Sharon Watts is with us. Good evening, Sharon. And it is a lovely evening because you're here, Sharon. Natasha Prevost, Happy New Year to you too. And Marcella Rich, God bless you. Thank you so much, Marcella, for joining us. My guest tonight is a good friend. I was impressed with him when I heard the beautiful music that he composed, and I heard his wonderful instrumentalism on the piano, his choir, the way he conducts choirs and orchestral interpretations. I was impressed when I learned that he had edited the African American hymnal with over 575 hymns and spirituals, and that hymnal is in many sanctuaries in churches across the country today. I was amazed by his wonderful presentations on stage, on television, and he is just a brilliant, brilliant individual. I have the honor of serving with him on the advisory board for the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, and it is a great honor to welcome this gentleman who I've been doing a lot of reading about people like Whoopi Goldberg and Bob Fosse, who, when they won Tony Awards, Tony Awards, Academy Awards, and what else did they win? Oscar. That's amazing. And this gentleman, I think, is headed in that direction. But the difference is that everything he does has a mission, and his mission is to have an impact on the greater good for all of God's people. And that's amazing. So I'd like to welcome my good friend, Nolan Williams, Jr. to HUR at Home Inspiration. Hello, Nolan.
Hey, Jackie. How are you?
I am blessed that you are here with us tonight. You've taken time out of your busy schedule to be with us.
Listen, you know, I am in the middle of writing and rewriting music for my musical. So, yeah, I literally am carving out a window. I've been working all day, and when we're done, I'm going to carve off this jacket and get back to work.
Okay. Well, I see that some of our mutual friends are with us this evening. Nancy Pinus.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Nancy.
Janice Farabee is with us.
Hey, Janice, back in my Metropolitan days.
Regina Jones Austin.
Regina.
And, yes, the people from Grace the Musical are with us too. So we're certainly going to talk about Grace the Musical.
That's great.
But I want those who are with us to understand how really talented you are. God has just given you a whole buffet of talent. And you really, it's like, you do one thing, but you move on to something else to exhibit more talents that God has given you. So you've grown up in Washington, D.C., right?
Yeah. I was born in L.A. and grew up here in Washington. So this is my home.
And you did attend Howard University's Divinity School.
Yeah. After I left Oberlin, where I did my undergrad, I came back here and went to Howard Divinity School. And at the same time, I was teaching at in the School of Fine Arts. So I was having the experience on both campuses. It was pretty amazing.
Now, you've been ministers of music at churches, and I talked about the African American Heritage Hymnal. So
Mhm.
it looked like you were going on a path towards maybe a pastor or something like that. But as it turned out, you expanded that to something more. Talk about how you came to that revelation that more needed to be done.
Yeah, well, to begin with, I never wanted to be a pastor, right? So growing up, my dad was a minister, and I saw firsthand what he was experiencing. And I just never felt that that was my calling, even though people were always so ready to say, oh, you're going to be just like your dad. I was like, I just don't feel like that's what I'm supposed to do. And so, I have. I have pursued my passion, which is for the arts, and found a way to hone that passion towards having greater impact. And so, through my company, Neworks Productions, which I established in 2003 formally, we've been on this mission of leveraging the power of music and the arts for community engagement and social good. And we do that based on four principles, always looking for art that will inspire, will uplift, that will educate and commemorate. And those are our four kind of guiding principles in terms of the projects that we work on and the projects that I feel called to do and pursue.
Talk about some of those projects that display those goals that you have.
Oh, wow. That's a really hard question to answer. So let me just see what I can come up with. I was brought into the Kennedy Center back in really starting around 2008 to develop a project called Joyful Sounds Gospel Across America that we ultimately produced in 2010. It was the first time that the Kennedy Center had ever done anything like that. It was a festival celebrating African American sacred music traditions that originally was supposed to have been 2 or 3 days, but by the time, I got through planning it, it went on for 9 days, and it involved every aspect of the center. I think I've been a part of Let Freedom Ring with Georgetown University and the Kennedy Center for 18, 19 years. I have done everything from producing theatrical productions to most recently putting out a documentary last year around DC statehood that aired in 5 CBS markets and for DC cable television. It really runs the gamut in terms of working with some of the leading artists of our times, developing a lot of my own original projects, but then also working with some incredible organizations and institutions along the way, from the U.S. State Department to embassies to arts organizations, you name it. We've had a pretty broad and robust history, and I'm really grateful for that and the impact that we've had.
Well, before we get to what's coming up in March at Ford's Theater, I wanted to know, with all of this experience that you are accumulating, are you mentoring young people in the arts? Is there any work going into inspiring young people to do what you're doing?
Yeah, it's really interesting that you would ask that, because one of the fascinating things that has happened over the years is that people are paying attention even when you don't realize they are. So it's very empowering for me when I get that unexpected inbox message from a young person that I may or may not know, who is just like curious, like, I see what you're doing, I see what you've been accomplishing, like, I am curious how I can follow in that kind of path. Or it's I have these ideas, can you help me think through these? And so, I really have been intentional through the years. Even back when I was at Metropolitan, we always made sure we had young people on staff. Whatever projects that we've done through Neworks, we've always been intentional about engaging young people at Howard University or at Duke Ellington, or doing some program at Alice Deal Middle School, or going into other parts of the community. Making sure that we're reaching young people is always important. And being available to young people when they reach out to ask questions is also very important.
Well, now let's talk about Grace. Talk about how your exploration of food and the African American traditions led to a musical.
Yeah, so okay, so the first name I need to mention, I know it's a name that you know or knew, and I celebrate the legacy of Stephen Newsom, who I think was a friend for both of us, a friend
Yes,
of ours. And
yes.
Stephen was, the walking encyclopedia when it came to Africana. He was amazing.
Hmm.
Stephen was the person that I would pick up the phone and call and go like, "Hey, Stephen, I'm thinking about doing this project about ABC." And then Stephen would go, "Well, you need to go look at these three videos, and then go check out this article from 5 years ago. Then go look at the Schoenberg's archives because they did a retrospective on this 15 year." Like literally, this is how Stephen just could rattle off this kind of history. Well, Stephen was the one. At the time, I was working on a Christmas production at the Clarice called Christmas Gift, which I think you'll remember because you helped to support us on that. And Stephen and I went to lunch one day. It was a very kind of random kind of gathering at Busboys and Poets. And Stephen brought a gift. It was this book. And I'm like, "Stephen, thank you. I appreciate that." He was like, "Nolan, you need to do something on African American food traditions." I was like, "Stephen, I have like 11 things on my plate right now. I'm not a foodie. I'll confess, I am not a foodie." So I was like, "I don't really think I'm the one." He was like, "You need to do something on African American food traditions." He gave me this book. "Read this book." I brought the book home, Jackie. I put it someplace, and it took months before I ever cracked that book. And when I did, I realized Stephen was right. Uh,
Hmm. He did a
because
very nice, he was with the Smithsonian, very
yes,
instrumental in African American studies and exhibitions at the Smithsonian Institution and the
yeah,
Anacostia Museum.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
he did an exhibit at the Smithsonian on African American food traditions.
And probably that's what he was cooking up. For me, then I started. While I'm not a foodie, I am a history buff, and I love when I learn things I didn't know. So I started discovering these foodways and food traditions, and learning things about the Black Eyed Pea and its origin, in Africa, and learning about how farm to table was how our folk were living at the turn of the century. Like it's a big concept now, but that's how we've been living honestly for decades. And the more I unearthed this history, literally the history started singing to me. And for those who are artists, who are watching, who are creatives, you know how when you have that stroke of inspiration and you just start creating art because of that inspiration. So I started writing music, Jackie, and I didn't even know what I was writing. It wasn't like I sat down and said, "I'm going to write a musical about food." It wasn't that at all. I literally started writing about Black Eyed Peas. And then I started writing about, I discovered W.E.B. Du Bois's work, The Philadelphia Negro. He has a whole segment in that work about the pioneers in and around Philadelphia that were early founders of the American Culinary Institution in Philadelphia and in the state of Pennsylvania. And he names them: Bogle, Augustine, Prosser, Dorsey, Jones, and Minton. There were two Prossers, father and son-in-law. So this was so fascinating. And I literally started writing a song called Bogle, Augustine, Prosser, Dorsey, Jones, and Minton. So the more I unearthed this history, the more the history started singing, the more I started writing. I started putting it together. I didn't know what it was. I was thinking maybe this is a musical review. I went to Robert Barry Fleming, who at the time was deputy over at Arena Stage. And I was like, "Look, I've got this collection. I don't even know what to call it, Robert. I've got this collection. I don't know if it's any good, but would you just kind of look at it? Will you listen to it?" And of course, our schedules were crazy. It took forever to get us together. And we finally met up one day. And what I thought was going to be a 10-minute meeting turned into a session that lasted over an hour. And Robert just kept saying, "You have more, you have more, you have more." And I started just playing for him everything that I had created. And by that point, it was easily a dozen or more songs. And he was like, "I think you're onto something. Continue to follow your creative pursuits." And that was around 2014. And here we are, 2022, 8 years later. And Grace is about to open at Ford's Theater in March. Can you believe it?
Where did the storyline come in? I think I read somewhere a family is involved in the.
Yeah. So the family concept came really two sources for that. One, I think, I spent a lot of time in Philadelphia between, I forget the years, all the years rolled together for me now, but between 2014, anyway, during the 2000s, about a 7-8 year stretch that I was working in Philadelphia and working with a range of arts organizations there, including the Mann Center for the Performing Arts. And I was developing these citywide curatorial festivals. But through that, I was working with the Philadelphia Orchestra, and I was working with the Franklin Institute, and working with the mayor's office on arts and culture. And I mean, it was pretty broad, the work that I was really blessed to do. And I developed such a great affection for the Philadelphia community. So in many ways, this project is a subtle but not so subtle homage to the people of Philadelphia who so warmly welcomed me into that community and supported the work and believed in the work that we were trying to do and the work that we accomplished. The festivals and the exhibitions that I mounted and the educational programming that I did. And all of that, if you go to neworksproductions.com, all of that is archived there. If you go to nolanwilliamsjr.com and look under cultural curation, it's all archived there. It was such an amazing process of being able to coalesce all of these organizations and people around the mission of just having impact and celebrating culture and commemorating things that really should not be forgotten. And so that's a part of it. But the other part was really born just out of the research that W.E.B. Du Bois did through his work, The Philadelphia Negro. He points out that these were early pioneers. And I thought, well, we should use this as the impetus for this. And the last of the pioneers that he lists is a man named Henry Minton. And so I've created this family that is really, these are fictionalized descendants of Henry Minton, who was a historical figure who owned and operated a restaurant in the heart of Philadelphia at the turn of the century. I mean, these Black men and their wives were early pioneers. They were doing catering in the homes of wealthy white folk. They had their own establishments. They literally helped to define the culinary industry as we know it in America. And so to be able to then lift up this family, the Mintons, that are descendants of that history, that great history, and to look at that through the lens of their restaurant that they've owned and operated for over 100 years called Minton's Place. And then to see the impact of gentrification and changing times and neighborhoods and dynamics now, and how that's threatening the future of that restaurant. But even more importantly, the restaurant becomes a symbol, and it's a symbol of cultural preservation. It's about how do we honor those things that are important to our culture, and how do we preserve culture? What are the impediments to preserving culture? And then for the characters that are involved, they not only embody that struggle, but they also embody what the title entails, grace, that we all need a little bit of grace. And we are both recipients and we should be extenders of grace.
Wow. Stephen would be so proud.
You
I
know,
remember how
he would be.
enthusiastic he was when the movie Soul Food came out.
Oh yeah,
And it was all about family and African American food traditions. But this takes it even higher. And our good friends at Forest Theater, they have in the chat that tickets are on sale now. And you can call tickets 888-616-0270.
yep.
And our good friend Janice Farabee, she wanted to know in the future, are there plans to do this, maybe record it or stream it or something so that people who cannot, because of COVID or because of illness, can't make it to the theater, that they can actually go. Maybe Ford's Theater can stream a special event of
Well,
it. Who knows?
well, we are definitely keeping our eyes on on the COVID ball to make sure that we can gather people safely in that space. Ford's has a lot of history with this because from the time that they started this season, they put in place very effective protocols that ensure that people can gather safely. They even made the tough decision to cancel their presentation of the mountaintop in order to avoid this surge, which also then sets us up for Grace to open in March in a way that we think will be on the declining side. We're already seeing that that the Omicron variant is declining. It doesn't mean we can let up. I mean, we still have to mask, we still have to be socially distanced, and those are the kinds of things, and we still need to be vaccinated, right? And the booster, like all of those things we have to do, and we have to be vigilant about doing. But we're hopeful then that we'll be in a good place come March. But if something happens in terms of a surge, we certainly will pursue whatever options we can to make sure that we continue to bring this message of grace to people. Ironically, let me share this, because we were initially going to have our world premiere for the Humana Festival of New American Plays at Actors Theater, and I want to celebrate them for their confidence in this project a year ago. And everything got shut down because of the COVID when it first came out. That was actually 2020. And ironically, we came back, and my production partner Del Mott and his company Edgewood, in partnership with my company Neworks Productions, we got together and put together an online chat called By Grace, and we got our culinary ambassador, Chef Carla Hall, to co-host this with myself. We initially thought, Jackie, that we'd reach, a few thousand people. And this was kind of the consolation prize for not being able to produce the show at Actors for Humana. We ended up reaching 30,000 people with just the first episode. And
Wow.
by the time we reached the sixth episode, we had reached over 500,000 people globally. So we realized that this message of grace and this idea of food traditions and celebrating family and legacy, it really is resonating. And we already have seen the potential wide impact of that kind of a message. So thank you, Janice, for making that suggestion. We'll be following through on that.
Well, definitely people want to see it. I see Jocelyn Johnson Williams. She says that I was on board to come to see the musical when it was going to debut in Kentucky, and now I'm on board with coming back to the DMV to see it at Ford's Theater. Can't wait.
Thanks, Josh. Josh is down in Texas. She got married and moved away, but she comes back as often as she can. Love you, Josh.
Well, thank God for technology so that she can chat with us today.
Yes.
And we've all been through so much these past 2 years because of COVID. You have just continued on, and so I wanted to see if there were any lessons that you learned during this COVID-19 period in life with the arts, dealing with the arts where people can't gather the way they used to.
That's a great question, Jackie, because when I first got back, so let me frame this context. 2020 was poised to be one of the best years ever. I was mounting Grace for Humana Festival of New American Plays, which is arguably one of the most celebrated festivals for the, introduction of new works. I had just workshopped Stirring the Waters Across America, my touring production at the Kennedy Center in the fall of 2019. We got great reviews. We were launching what was going to be a national tour of that project in Nashville in February, and we launched it at Vanderbilt University. That was very successful, and we were prepared to take that across the country, and then COVID came. Mm-hmm. So 2 productions, both just kind of brought to a screeching halt. I came home from Louisville and did something. Anyone who knows me will know that what I'm about to say is just so far removed from me and what they know about me. I came home and I was low-key depressed. I laid on my couch for about a week and a half and joined Netflix community. I wasn't even a member of Netflix. I joined Netflix and I started binge watching all of these freaking shows on Netflix. Like, to know me is to know I am not that guy that sits around on the couch all day binge watching. I'm always like, well, okay, I got 20 projects. I got to get this done. I got to do that. But I was just like, what's the point? The world has come to a halt. What's the point? And then I like to say I came to myself. And I had this revelation. Take another look at what you're working with. Take another look at what you have. And I really have to shout out Del Mott, my producing partner, for this, because Del was also a part of this process of saying, Nolan, let's just look at the assets that are already in place and see how we can repurpose those assets. Mm-hmm. And we were able to take the voting rights song from Stirring the Waters production and repurpose it into the I Have a Right to Vote viral video that ended up reaching more than 1.3 million people during the election cycle, with the message of, stop blocking the vote. Let me just say, as a parenthetical note, I'm so disappointed in our U.S. Congress and what happened a few nights ago, but that's for another conversation. But every U.S. citizen deserves the right to vote, free access to the ballot. And that's what that song was about. And we were able to take that song and literally shift and run with that. We were able to take the message of grace and turn it into the By Grace live chat series. And then, this year we were awarded Telly Awards bronze prizes for both of those projects. So literally I went from binge watching Netflix to having produced award-winning projects. And it was all because I took another look at what I already had, what was already in my hands, what was already immediate and accessible. And that has been a wonderful firsthand lesson for me. And I have seen so many creatives doing that. And I celebrate that and I affirm that, and a shout out to every single creative under the sound of my voice that has found a way to repurpose what we do and to shift and keep moving forward, keep pressing forward.
And God bless Dale for telling you to take a look and count your blessings.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, what is the, you're a man of vision. I know you are, you're working, you're very present with what you're doing now, but there's always something on the horizon. What's the shiny apple in the tree that you're reaching for now?
Another great question. I've got a number of projects in the works, especially theatrical productions. And so beyond Grace, I'm very excited about a project, and I'll go ahead and mention this because I'm working on a musical called Divine Hamer Gray. And I'm very excited about that. It captures the untold story of 3 women from the civil rights era who ran for Congress in 1964 and almost succeeded, Black women, almost succeeded in defeating the white men from their Mississippi congressional delegation. It's a powerful, untold story. And I had a chance to do an early iteration of this, working with the March on Washington Film Festival back in 2019. We presented a workshop of it at George Washington University. But I'm continuing to develop that, and I'm very excited. I've got a book writer on board, and I think that's going to amount to a really powerful project as well. And then I am actually going back and taking Christmas Gift, and I'm in the process now of reworking that as well. I have another co-book writer on board for that. So, you know me, Jackie, I always have lots of irons in the fire. And I want to shout out a friend of mine who said, it's all right to have a lot of balls bouncing. The key is to just know which ones are rubber and which ones are crystal.
Ooh, like that.
Those words have stuck with me. Brenda Gert Mitchell, thank you for that. Those words have stuck with me. So I know which ones I can't afford to drop and which ones I can let bounce. And just through the process of just the science, they're going to stay bouncing until I can get back to them. But I always multiple irons.
Well, thank you so much for taking time out. And I'm going to let you go so you can take your jacket off and get back to work. But before we go, okay. Could you give us a closing prayer?
Sure. And I want to thank you again, Jackie, for having me on and for all that you have done and are doing for our community. When I think about preserving culture, which is such a principal theme of Grace, you are a central part of how culture is not only preserved, but advanced in our community. And that's one of the things I've always loved and respected about you. I thank you, and I'm saying this publicly because whenever I've reached out to you, you have always been willing to provide a platform for me to share. And then even like this, you've reached out to me when you see I'm doing stuff like, Nolan, why don't you come on and just talk about what you're doing? I didn't even fully know what we were talking about, but Jackie said, come on my program and talk. Like, Jackie, I'm there. I'm there. Whatever you want to talk about, I'm there. So thank you so much for doing that and for being that. I want to use some words from the show to pray us out.
Okay.
I don't know how this is going to flow, but I'm going to just randomly share some lyrics because some of these lyrics, I think they certainly reflect my own heart sentiments, but I hope they resonate. The opening song of this show is a song called "By Grace," and it simply says, "Seems we always come together when someone weds or someone dies. Then we're reminded what it means to have our family in our lives, and of the love we need to make it through these times. Thank God we're here by grace." There's another song that speaks to this present time in terms of the challenges that we face. And it reminds us that we're facing a new normal. And that even when we're facing tough times, that we have to summon something within ourselves that helps us to find the strength, the perseverance, the determination, and the faith that we need to make it through those tough times. And in that spirit, we thank you for this opportunity, God, to commune and to meditate. We thank you that our lives and our times are in your hands. We thank you that we are recipients of grace, unmerited favor. And we pray all the more that as we are recipients of grace, we will become even more extenders of grace. And may that be so. Amen.
Amen. Amen. That's from Grace. That'll be at Ford's Theater in March
18th through May the 14th. You can go to fords.org. You can go to gracethemusical.com. You can go to nolanwilliamsjr.com. There are many different pathways that all lead you to the same ticket portal on Ford's website for the musical. And we certainly hope that you'll come and bring your friends. It's going to be a really wonderful experience, a celebration of culture and a celebration of life and legacy.
God bless you, Nolan.
Bless you too, Jackie. Love you much, dear.
Love you too. There's no sin in watching Netflix every once in a while. Please take it easy.
Listen.
Take care of yourself.
All right, you too.
And thank you everyone for joining us on HUR at Home Inspiration. Tell your friends this is posted on YouTube. If they didn't join us now, they can join us later and watch this tremendous conversation with Reverend Nolan Williams Jr. And he'll always be a reverend in my heart. Let's put it that way, because of all of the great work that he does that has a positive impact on all of us as God's people. So listen, see you next Sunday. Please take care, and thank you once again for joining us on HUR at Home Inspiration. Please be safe and be blessed.